Hacking Chinese can be seen as a very long answer to the question of what I would have done differently if I could go back in time and learn Chinese again from scratch. However, most people don't want to read 800,000 words to get the full picture, which is why I have distilled all that into just a few courses. Hello and welcome to the Hacking Chinese podcast. In this week's episode, we are going to do something slightly different than usual. Around this time of year, many people are starting new courses, or maybe you've decided it's time to level up your Chinese in some other way. Normally, I share weekly articles and podcasts about all areas of learning Mandarin, but I do also offer a few courses that enable me to provide all that other content for free. And since this week there is a $10 discount for two of my courses, and in September I will open the pronunciation course for registration again, I thought that in this week's episode I'll talk a little bit about these courses and why I created them and what you will learn from them. And I will try to do so in a way that is interesting even if you are not in a position to buy the courses. Hacking Chinese has been around now for almost 11 years, and I've published more than 800,000 words about learning Chinese. And this leads to a problem where people don't see the forest for all the trees. And I write articles sometimes about very specific things, which means that you might see all the dots, but it's kind of hard to connect all of them and get kind of the overall image here. So that's been the major challenge that I have tried to solve in all my courses. There is a lot of information, research, and advice in different areas, but it's hard to summarize it and present it at the right level of detail. I also realize that for most people, just reading about something is not really engaging enough, and to really learn some things, you need to work with the material, and when it comes to something like pronunciation, it is so much easier when I can talk and when we can have a video to show things and you can listen to things along the way. So in this manner, I've created 3 video courses with different target audience and different content. So the first one is a beginner course, which targets people who are in their first semester or who are learning on their own without much guidance, or even people who learn with a teacher or with a course, but simply don't find that the course teaches them everything that they need, which is normal actually. The second course is a broader upgrade how you learn Chinese course, which is not really targeted at beginners, but more at intermediate and maybe even advanced students who think that, yeah, I've been doing this for a while now, but maybe you don't feel that you're making much progress, or there are some areas you're not sure how to approach. Maybe you read too slowly, or you struggle with pronunciation, or you find it difficult to remember characters, or something like that. So it's a course to try to boost or upgrade the way you are learning. And the third course is a pronunciation course, which, as the name implies, will teach you everything about pronunciation, including initials, finals, tones, rhythm, prosody, and so on, including how to learn these things. So if you thought that your course wasn't really enough, or if you've been learning for a bit and you struggle with certain things and you want to really figure out how these things work so you can improve them, then that course is for you. So let's start by talking a little bit about the beginner course, which is called Unlocking Chinese. So this is based on things that I know that most courses, textbooks, and teachers leave out. And while the course does include basic grammar, basic vocabulary, and so on, the main point of the course is teaching you how to learn these things. So this is not really a substitute for a university course, it's more like a companion you can use to get the most out of any other course, including things you might find online. So I don't teach you all the words manually one by one, I don't go through everything in detail, but I do provide the support you need to be able to learn as efficiently as possible. If we simplify things a lot, we can say that there are 3 factors that influence how much you learn. It is how much time you spend, how efficient your method is, and what content you're focusing on. So it follows that you need to find ways of studying that you enjoy, that you can make work with whatever other things you're doing in life, and this involves a certain amount of experimentation and thinking about learning in a way that doesn't limit it just to, say, language lessons. You can actually get a lot of listening and reading done throughout the day and throughout the week without actually adding that much more study time in the traditional sense. And this is something that requires you to understand the time you spend, what time you have available, and how you can fit various activities into your existing schedule. Naturally, how efficient your method is also quite important, because if you spend 100 hours doing something that is mostly useless, you are not going to learn much. So if your goal is to learn to speak Chinese and you spend 100 hours writing by hand, maybe it has almost no impact at all on your actual goal. So you need to make sure you are doing the right thing depending on what your goal is. So in this course, naturally, we go through that and we talk about efficient methods of learning various aspects of Mandarin. And finally, the third factor is what you are learning. And this is extremely important as a beginner because there is a set of very high frequency words that you really should learn before you learn lower frequency words. And the reason for this is, of course, that the more high frequency words you learn, the more likely you are to be able to make sense of what people say and write. And that increases the amount of comprehensible input, that is, reading and listening, that you can make sense of, and that enables you to acquire more language. This is not really a problem in most modern textbooks because the first few chapters actually do contain really, really high frequency words. You have to have pronouns and basic verbs and so on. But most textbooks actually start derailing quite fast and include lots of things that you actually don't need while leaving out some things you really, really need. And I've included a sentence pack in this course that teaches you 150 words, and it does so in a sequence where each sentence only adds a single word. So you should be able to make sense of this without any textbook and without much help, even though there is help if you actually need it. Unlocking Chinese is not only about how to learn the language, though, it's also about the language itself. And I focused on two areas here that I think most beginners struggle with because it tends to be quite different from learning other languages if you've done that. So the first of these is obviously pronunciation, because here we have tones. We also have lots of strange sounds that you haven't heard before. And if you just treat pinyin as English, you will have problems later. Very few adults achieve natural and clear pronunciation in Mandarin without actually trying to. Some people do, but most of us need to spend extra time and energy to make sure that we are understood when we speak, because there's nothing more demotivating than having learned something and then trying it out with real people and they simply frown or shrug and they simply don't know what you're saying. The other part of learning Chinese where it's beneficial to have a good idea of what you're doing is characters. And here it depends a little bit on where you're coming from and how much you know about characters in advance, but most people have lots of misconceptions about characters, such as they are pictures, and you learn them best by writing them over and over and over, which is also sadly what some teachers recommend. Actually, the first question you might want to ask yourself is how much you actually need to learn here. Do you need to learn to write by hand? Should you even start learning characters from the very beginning, or should you maybe focus on the spoken language first? And we talked about this specific question in episode 1 of the podcast if you want to learn more about that. I think that's enough about unlocking Chinese. If you want to know more about it, you can go to unlockingchinese.com. The next course, which is actually one I created first, is called A Practical Guide to Learning Mandarin. And this course is, like I said, aimed at basically everyone except beginners who should definitely check out Unlocking Chinese first. But this course essentially covers the same topics that I do on Hacking Chinese in general, but does it in a video format with some exercises and extra content. And in this case, there's actually quite a lot of extra content. There is a 300-page ebook and an audio edition that I recorded of that ebook. There's also a study checklist and a bunch of discounts for various useful services. So, like Unlocking Chinese, this course also brings up things that I think are overlooked often in courses, and this is of course not limited to beginners now. One example of this is memory and memory techniques, which is something there is quite a lot of research into, and there's also a big community online of people who experiment with memory, compete in memory competitions and so on. And all these things can be applied to learning languages. It's not equally applicable to all areas, of course, but there's a lot we can learn from how these people learn things and how they remember them. For example, when it comes to Chinese characters. Another thing that is central here is to create an immersion environment at home. So some people think that you have to go to China to learn Chinese, or that it's impossible to learn Chinese if you stay at home. And this is simply not true. There are lots of people who go to China who don't learn Chinese, and there are people who master Chinese without ever leaving home. And if you want an example of that, you can check out my interview with Carl Jean Fordham in an article called Chinese Immersion with Carl Jean Fordham on Hacking Chinese. This is, of course, something that has become a lot easier in recent years when we have the internet and we have digital resources and so on. But building up this digital immersion environment at home is something that can be done. And in this course, I provide a few suggestions for how to do that, such as how to get audio, how to sort the audio, how to manage your files and things like that, so that you will gradually build up a library of things that you can immerse yourself into. If you want to find out more about this course, you can go to hackingchinese.com/courses and just select Hacking Chinese, a practical guide to learning Mandarin. The final course is also the most recent one, and it focuses exclusively on pronunciation. And this is an area where child language learning and adult language learning differ quite a lot. Almost all children learn their native language perfectly when it comes to pronunciation, at least according to the standards where they live or how people they are surrounded by speak the language. And that's simply not true for foreign adults. There are plenty of people who have studied Chinese for 10 years or more and still cannot pronounce basic tones. I have a friend who studied Chinese for about 4 years before he learned about tones or realized that tones are important, and he had to go back and relearn everything from scratch. And to put it mildly, this is not something that we recommend that students do. So the earlier you start focusing on pronunciation, the better it is, because when you've studied for years, fixing a problem can be quite hard. And I'm talking from personal experience here. I learned the third tone incorrectly and I was saying it wrong for a few years before someone really pointed out to me and said, hey, you're doing this wrong. You're saying it's not just a little wrong, it's completely off. And at first I didn't believe them even. I needed to verify this, but then after a bit I realized, okay, I'm just wrong. I've learned this incorrectly for some reason, and I've listened to people speak Chinese for hundreds of hours without noticing this. And once someone had pointed it out, I started gradually realizing, hey, this is actually how it sounds. I was able to gradually start saying it like that, and now we are some 10 years later, and I think I very rarely make this mistake. But without someone pointing this out and without me noticing this in the Chinese I was listening to, I would still have this problem. And I know many people who have learned Chinese for many years and still make this mistake. And I talked about this particular problem in episode 26 quite a lot, so if you're interested in it, you can check that out. Anyway, back to the pronunciation course. It covers all those things that your teacher went through very quickly in the first few weeks, and that's kind of in the beginning of a textbook, but you never actually spend time to go through. It covers everything about initials, finals, tones, but also prosody, so we're talking about things like rhythm, stress, and things like that. And it does so in depth, so you will know everything about pinyin. You will also be able to learn IPA, that's the International Phonetic Alphabet for these sounds, along with how to say the sounds and how to shape your tongue and where to put it and things like that. There's also an option to get professional feedback on your pronunciation, and this is something you can use as a beginner if you're not sure you're doing it right. So while you work your way through the course, you can submit recordings to me and I will personally go through them and give you feedback and highlight areas where you can improve and point out what you are already doing quite well. And if you've studied for a while, this includes if you've studied for many, many years, but you simply want to really check how good your pronunciation is, there's a second version of this check where I go through your pronunciation on all levels. So it's words, phrases, free speech, and all of that. And I go through initials, finals, tones, your rhythm, prosody, everything. And I give you detailed breakdowns of what you're doing well and which areas you should improve, and also how to do so. This part actually takes me quite a lot of manual work to do because I do all the analysis myself. And that means that the course is limited in availability. I only offer the feedback part to 30 people, and I only open the course occasionally for registration. And this semester we will open it on September 20th, and it will be open for roughly a week before it closes again. Of course, depending on how busy I am with other things, I will open this course again later. So if you hear about this after the course has closed this time around, check out hackingchinese.com/courses and go down to the pronunciation course to check when it is available next. You can also check out episode 25 of the podcast, where I talked more about the course and also included the introduction to the course itself. So to round this podcast off, I would like to share what I think is the most important advice when it comes to pronunciation, and that is to mimic. And I've said this a lot of times, so if you're a long-time listener or reader, you should be familiar with this by now. But mimicking is a very powerful method because it combines listening and listening very attentively, which is kind of the key to pronunciation, with pronunciation practice. Because if you're just speaking Chinese, the likelihood is that you're mainly relying on skills that you already have. In order for your brain to get enough data and information about how sounds are supposed to be, you need to listen, and you need to listen attentively. So when you mimic, you combine this, you listen to what someone else says, you say it along with that person, and you can then compare. And this is also very powerful because it can be done mostly on your own. Naturally, at some point, you do want feedback, But you can do a lot of this on your own, and it's often possible to hear when something is different from the original audio. Even if you're not necessarily sure exactly what is different, you can still find lots of mistakes on your own this way, and it is completely free. So if I were to go back in time and give myself advice about my own pronunciation, I would have said that I should mimic a lot more, and I should listen a lot more and pay attention. Not care that much about speaking myself necessarily, not how it's written, just listening and mimicking. Obviously, I would have liked to tell myself about my third tone issue a lot earlier, but we already talked about that. So these are the 3 courses that I currently offer, and I think there should be something for everyone. And even if you're not interested in a course yourself, maybe you know someone who is, and I would appreciate it if you recommended the course. My ability to publish articles and record podcast episodes is, of course, dependent on these courses, so I would greatly appreciate your help. And if you have any questions, you can of course contact me at editor@hackingchinese.com, and I will do my best to help you out. Thank you for tuning in to the Hacking Chinese podcast. If you like this episode, please share it. More information and inspiration about learning and teaching Chinese can be found at hackingchinese.com. See you in the next episode, and until then, good luck with your studies.